Oscar Pistorius made bail today. The star athlete charged with the premeditated murder of his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, has been granted that bail. And at the end of a week-long bail hearing, Chief Magistrate Desmond Nair made it clear today that he did find certain parts of Pistorius' account implausible, but ultimately determined that Pistorius did not represent a flight risk. Bail was set at 1 million South African rand, which is approximately $113,000. So joining us to discuss this, we've got South African journalist Aldrin Samper on the phone and trial attorney Richard Roth. So welcome to both of you. And Aldrin, let me actually start with you because you were in the courtroom this morning. So what can you tell us about today's bail hearing and what happened?
Well, basically, today's bail hearing was very tense inside the courtroom. Remember that there was the main courtroom, which was courtroom C, and that courtroom was totally packed to capacity. But they had set up another courtroom which had the video link of the judge handing down, of the magistrate handing down his verdict on this bail application. A very tense moment indeed. I was sitting right in front of the defense team, and you'd find them as the magistrate would read his judgment. At some points where the magistrate would agree with their argument, you'd find them smiling, quite relaxed, and then when you find the magistrate probably disagreeing with their arguments and siding with the state, then it just became tense. At some point, one of the members of the defense team actually took off his reading glasses and started rubbing his eyes because it really seemed as though things weren't going the way they planned.
And at the same time, when we heard the magistrate really read this decision, this was a very long lecture, and so I'm curious how that was taken in the courtroom. I imagine that the nerves must have been high to just continuously hear that go on and on and on before they actually got to the decision.
It was, for lack of a better description, it was really, really crazy. Because when he started his initial verdict, it went on for about 40 minutes. And then we took a quick break, a 5-minute break, and people went like, oh, what's happening now? And then only after that, did he really delve into some of these arguments that he had. And, Oscar, on the other hand, very composed. And I feel kind of weird that even after the magistrate said that I'm granting you bail, there was no sense of relief or sense of joy or something like that. He just started crying.
I can imagine emotions are very high there. Richard, let's get your take here, too. I mean, clearly this is the South African justice system, but just in looking at it, do you think that this means that the government's case is weak because Pistorius was granted bail? At the same time, the magistrate did still leave it open to say that he thinks that this might be a case where premeditated murder is something that they can pursue in the actual trial.
Yeah, that's a very good question. This is a huge win for Oscar Pistorius. Everyone walked into this thing thinking that it was a lockdown win for the prosecutor. But as it turns out, this Botha, who was a detective, made a lot of mistakes. And with those mistakes, the magistrate said, I don't really know what happened here. I don't know if, in fact, she was murdered or if, in fact, he believed an intruder was in the house. So those mistakes are going to be really, if you will, the linchpin, the base for the defense here. It was a big win, I believe, for Pistorius to actually be granted bail, especially for $113,000. And
can you pinpoint what you thought some of those biggest mistakes were that the prosecutor made?
Yeah, well, first of all, unbeknownst to at least the prosecutor, that this detective was involved in his own murder trial, his own murder issue. He and other detectives were allegedly shot down people and are in the middle of their own criminality, which is not a good thing when you're a detective. Number one. Number two is that there's some shells that were missing or misplaced. There's some failure to put on the boots when you walk into the room, so there's footprints all over the place. And it's these little things that a defense attorney is going to hound on to try to make it seem like, they really don't know what they're doing. They can't prove the tremendous burden they have. So it is a big win for Pistorius, and it's somewhat sad if, in fact, he really did murder her.
And do you think that there are any cases that we can compare this to? Obviously, this is a unique situation, and it always is, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to try to find comparisons. And the name O.J. Simpson has come up.
Yeah, without a doubt. O.J. Simpson, 100%. That is the comparison. With O.J. Simpson, the defense just kept battering and badgering the detectives with the inappropriate blood sampling, the inappropriate taking of blood, the inappropriate walking through the premises. It was just on and on and on. And what we have seen here, and understand this is the very beginning of the investigation, the defense has essentially gotten similar characteristics, similar, if you will, evidence that's been spoiled. So this is going down that the O.J. Simpson trial avenue. We don't know how much worse it is, how much more the detectives have done that isn't good, but it is a big win for Pistorius to be released on bail and have these problems, especially when this detective Botha, when asked, said, I don't know what happened here. His story may very well be true.
Alger, let's go back to you for a moment, too. What did you make of the magistrate's words when he was talking about the effect that the media has on a case like this, in the sense that it's something that people are tweeting about, that we're finding out about every second, and that it really can affect perceptions?
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear you, hey?
Oh, sure. I'll repeat.
Just repeat that question for me.
Absolutely. The magistrate today was talking about the effect of the media on the way that the pretrial hearings might go on and the way that court proceedings might go on as well. When we're getting information every moment, he said that, it sometimes might twist the way that people think that the trial proceedings are going on.
Yes, that was basically his emphasis, because remember that when the trial kicked off, there was an application. When this bail application, the hearing kicked off, there was an application that came from the media that can we broadcast these proceedings live, and he basically declined. And he didn't go in much detail at the time when he declined that application. But today he really delved into this matter and his reasoning behind it, and basically stating that, listen, you do find situations where media tend to cover stories tend to cover cases of this nature in a certain way, because the media has their own agenda and so forth. Even he talked about the editing of sound and so forth, that the editing of sound will be edited in such a manner that it creates a different impression to what has been said in the courtroom.
And Richard,
at some point you also spoke about the conduct of the photographers, for instance, during this bail hearing. He said that the photographers were going on as if this person Oscar was some sort of species. The minute that he walked out of the cell and into the dock, they were just all over him.
Yeah, and that happens every time, right? And it really does shape the way that people view the way that a trial is happening. If it's a photograph that's been snapped where somebody is crying and showing a lot of emotion or not. Richard, let me just go back to you for a moment. So the actual trial date has been set for months from now, starting in June. What do you think needs to happen in the meantime? What are some of the preparations that are going to go on?
Well, from the defense side, it's quite obvious. They have to find more mistakes, more errors. Remember, the magistrate said, it's been reported, has been saying today, that the detective made, quote, several errors and concessions. So what the defense has to do is get those errors and just line them up. And the more they pile up, the more the prosecutor's case falls. The prosecutor, on the other hand, has to really has to start all over. They've apparently gotten rid of this Mr. Botha. They have a new detective working on it, maybe too little too late. But both sides really have it. It's a different ball game today than it was 2 days ago. Very different.
All right, Richard and Aldrin, I want to thank you both so much for joining us, filling us in on the latest details. We'll obviously continue covering this case here. Thanks. Post Live coming up in just a moment.